Hey, it's Brendan here from WPSpeedFix.com. We're a WordPress speed optimization agency. We've optimized over 5,000 sites in the last few years. So we know a bit about site speed, WordPress site speed, and Core Web Vitals. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to improve your Core Web Vitals score or get a passing grade. This is going to be part one in a series of, I think, 3 videos. We'll see how we go. But in this video, we're going to talk about Core Web Vitals in general, understanding how they work. There's a lot of misconception out there. People get confused a lot between Pagespeed Insights or Pagespeed Score and Core Web Vitals and what it all means. So let's get into it. So before we get started, we need to talk about this lab data versus field data. So in places like Google Pagespeed Insights, you'll see this or these terms used all over the place. So lab data or field data. So just to be clear, Core Web Vitals is what's called field data. So that is data captured from real visitors hitting your website. So they're real users and it's the real speed that they're getting on their website. So it's real world data and it's the real speed. Lab data or synthetic testing is the speed you'll get in a speed test tool like Google Pagespeed Insights. And you'll see, I'll just click over here. I've got a few tabs open. You'll see here, this section at the top here, this is what's called, and I'm using this site here, Didgeridoo Dojo. This is the Core Web Vitals data, and this is field data. So it's important to understand that, and you can see here, so this is actually a good example. The page speed score itself doesn't mean much. So you can see here on this page, on the home page, I got a 96. So that's a really good score. It's in the green, but I'm deeply failing Core Web Vitals. So there's a few reasons for that. One is, depending on what the site is and how much traffic it's getting, this data here, this field data, this Core Web Vitals data will be based either on the entire site, and you'll see here that it's origin, so that means the entire site, or just the web address. So if the web address or URL has enough traffic, then it will show the data for just that page. If it doesn't, then it will show the site-wide data. So that's what's going on here. This is why this page is fast, but there are other pages on the site that are really slow, and that's why it's failing Core Web Vitals here. So the field data is showing what users are actually getting, but I'm actually getting green in this test. You'll see a lot of, and the homepage is actually fast, but there's a lot of other pages on the site that are slow, and that's because it's a membership site based on an old platform, and the membership software is really slow. But just to drive my point home here, there's a lot of agencies out on the web that will promise you a certain score in Google PageSpeed Insights, but that doesn't mean you'll get a passing score in Core Web Vitals. And a lot of the time they're hacking or cheating the test as well. So a lot of the time what these agencies will do is they pause some of the JavaScript or even most of the website. It doesn't load until the user interacts with it. So what's happening is the page speed test here, and other crawlers as well, like when Google's crawler comes along, they don't actually get the full website. So they're not actually seeing the real full website loading. They're seeing a partial version of the website. So that score is really good in the synthetic test, but in the real world, that doesn't actually speed things up. So it's important to understand that Core Web Vitals is the real world speed data. It's also based on a 28-day average. So it's a 28-day rolling average. So a change you make today will take some time to show up and see these numbers shift. So this is one common problem we have working with customers. They don't understand that this data is on 28-day average. It's not yesterday's data. So it will take some time to update and change. We'll see here, latest 28-day collection period. So in some cases, depending on where you're looking at the data, it might be the last 28 days or it could be the last month. So it depends, but it is an average of the data over a 28-day period. So in most cases, so just keep that in mind when you're looking at the data. And it is the real speed people are getting. So just because you get, just like in this example here, just because you're getting a good score doesn't necessarily mean you're going to pass Core Web Vitals or that users are getting a fast user experience. A lot of the time, the location of the user really can make a difference, and we'll see, and I'll show you in a few minutes. We'll see sites that have a lot of traffic from the US, super fast, and then a lot of traffic from India or Pakistan, somewhere like that. And that's the same with our WP Speedfix website. And just because the internet in those countries is poor, they're getting a slow speed in those countries. There's also some things to do with geography there, but because of the quality of internet speed in those countries, a lot of those users are failing Core Web Vitals, whereas in the US, super fast and passing. The traffic source also matters, and I'll show you an example of that too. So if you are sending traffic to your site with query strings attached to it for marketing and tracking tools, a good example of this is Google Ads with click fraud tracking. a lot of the time, the query strings that come along to make that click fraud work actually bypass all the speed optimization. And I have a good example in our Core Vitals tracking tool, which I'll show you. And the problem is that's paid traffic, so it's expensive traffic, and they're getting the slowest user experience of all. And a lot of the time, and this example I show you, the website will actually fail Core Vitals because that traffic is dragging down the averages. So what else do we need to talk about? So we talked about that. So it's real world data. So there's a number of metrics, but the three important metrics are LCP, largest contentful paint. So that is really the speed metric here. So what that is when the biggest element on the page has loaded. So it's when the user essentially perceives the page as having loaded, and Google says good for that is under 2.5 seconds. And to get a passing grade, you need to have 75% or more of your visitors in that good range. So the needs improvement, so the yellow or the orange you'll see around the web, that's 2.5 seconds to 4 seconds LCP, and then bad, like red, is over 4 seconds LCP. So some users are going to get good, some are going to be in the needs improvement, and some are going to get poor. That's normal, but we need 75% or more of those users in that good or green zone in order to have a passing grade. Now, in some cases, the website, all the pages on the site will be the same speed. In other cases, you might have particular pages on the website that are slow for different reasons. You might have a WooCommerce site, for example, that has, slow cart pages or slow product pages, whatever it is. It might be specific pages that are slow, or it could be specific users or types of users or users in specific locations that are slow. So keep that in mind. It's not one of the common issues we see people make is they test their homepage, they test it one time, and that's it. But speed doesn't work like that. Speed is three-dimensional. So all pages on the site matter, users from different locations matter, and the speed over time matters. And the speed may vary throughout the day depending on where users are located and the quality of your hosting. The speed could actually be slower during peak times just because of load on the internet or load on the hosting. But that's LCP, so that is the speed metric we care about. So there are other tools on the web like Pingdom Speed Tester that still uses load time. We don't care about load time anymore. We care about LCP time because that is when the user perceives the page as having loaded. So all these metrics or Core Vitals is basically an attempt to represent or reflect what the user is experiencing in kind of hard numbers. So that's what it's all about. It's all about user experience. The next one's INP. So this is a new metric introduced this year, 2024, interaction to next paint. So this is a measure of how responsive the site is, how quickly it responds to user inputs. So good for INP means that the site needs to react in under 200 milliseconds to user inputs. So different pages are going to have different user inputs. That might be things like search boxes, might be things like opt-in boxes, adding to cart. So basically any way the user's interacting with the website. And in some cases, your site might not have any INP data because it's just a content site and the users don't really interact other than clicking around. So it may not have much data for it. If you have a dynamic site like a WooCommerce site or a membership site, you're probably going to have a lot of INP data, or if users are doing a lot of things like searching. So just keep that in mind. So INP is how responsive the site is to inputs, basically. And it's a bit more, it's quite a complicated metric because there's several factors involved in generating the INP score, I guess, or how responsive the site is. Many of the things include distance away from the hosting, the load on the hosting, what you're doing. There's things, a presentation layer, like how long it takes to display the change. There's a lot of kind of underlying tech stuff there, but just think of it as an interaction metric. So you can see here, there's like 3 descriptions across the top here: load time or loading, interactivity, and then CLS, cumulative layout shift, is how stable the page or the site is while it's loading. So this is not a speed, this is a calculated number. So this is kind of a metric based on how stable the page is when it's loading. So probably the best way to think about this is you've probably gone to a website that it's loading, you go to click on something, and then the site kind of finishes loading and your mouse is now in the wrong spot. The layout has moved around and you're going to be clicking in the wrong place. So that's what layout shift is. So It depends on many factors. Sometimes if you over aggressively, we'll see sites that have been too aggressively optimized and that actually introduces layout shift. There might be other reasons, but images have been changed on the site and an image might be too big for a particular place. There could be speed issues with the site causing layout shift, but important to keep in mind, it is not speed, it is how stable the layout is, and it's not a time, it's a computed metric. So that's that. So those are the three main metrics. There are some other, I'll just click over to this guest post we did for Diggity Marketing a few years ago. There are some other metrics that you probably need to keep in mind while we're talking about metrics. Time to first byte. It's not a core web vitals metric, but it's how quickly the server responds to requests. So because everything else relies on how quickly the server responds, if you have a bad time to first byte number, TTFB, then the other metrics are likely going to be bad. So the LCP will probably be bad and the INP will probably be bad if the time to first byte is poor. So while Google doesn't track that, it does really show up in the other metrics. So keep that in mind. Page size or page weight, how big the page is. So we have a metric, a loose metric, that 3 megabytes is probably the biggest you want a page to be. After a page is over 3 megabytes, then it starts to slow down. And typically, broadly speaking, a page that's over 3 megabytes will fail Core Web Vitals. It's not a hard measurement, but it is something we see again and again. So we want the page to be under 3 megabytes. Document complete, load time, on load time. This is an old metric. We don't really use this at all anymore. So there are some technical reasons why we look at this, but from a customer perspective, from a marketer's perspective, we don't care about this metric. Anything talking about load time, like pingdom, we don't care about. It doesn't mean anything because it doesn't reflect what the user is seeing. LCP is a much better reflection of what the user is experiencing on the site. Okay, fully loaded time, same thing. We don't care about fully loaded time anymore. Fully loaded time can be really high, and it doesn't affect the user's experience on the website. And particularly with a lot of marketing tools today, they're going to push that fully loaded time up. It doesn't necessarily mean that the LCP time will be poor. Number of requests. This is the number of things that are loading on a page. We use this in a troubleshooting and site speed optimization work, but it's not really important as a metric to aim for. So it's it's kind of sort of involved in site speed optimization, but it's not a metric to focus on as a standalone thing. FCP is important. It's like LCP. FCP is the start of the render. LCP is the end of the render. So this is when the user perceives the site as having started to load. So we do care about this because we do care about user experience here. So lower is always better here. This number is actually wrong. I don't know why it shows like this here, but FCP needs to be under 1.8 seconds to be in the good zone. So that's what we care about there. It's not a Core Web Vitals metric, like a core metric, but it is one of the metrics Google tracks. So it is important. CLS we talked about. Render blocking, this is very commonly misunderstood. This is not an error. We see this all the time. People want to avoid render blocking resources. Things like JavaScript and CSS are required to render the page. So render blocking really just means there are things loading that are required to render the page. So it's not necessarily an error that needs to be fixed. Again, sometimes things can be render blocking and shouldn't be there. But in this case, you'll see this in this screenshot example here, the site is loading some CSS and some JavaScript, and that is required to render the page. So it's not actually an error or problem that needs to be solved. So just keep that in mind. Render blocking doesn't necessarily mean things are broken or bad. What else do we have? Total blocking time. We don't care about this too much anymore. This has been replaced by another metric or the metric IMP. It is useful in terms of troubleshooting, but wouldn't be something to focus on. Same with speed index. We don't focus on that. Async and defer. We can talk about this in another video, but this is basically related to JavaScript optimization, and there's 3 ways to optimize JavaScript, but we'll talk about that a bit later. I won't go into too much detail here. So those are the metrics that you need to keep in mind or you need to be familiar with when we're talking about Core Web Vitals stuff. So now, what else? Let's get into how to measure or see what your Core Web Vitals data looks like right now. About measuring Core Web Vitals data or tracking it. There's 3 free tools that allow you to do it. The first one is Google Search Console. And if you don't have this set up, you should have it set up for your site. It gives you an insight or gives you insights into how Google is looking at your site and all sorts of important information. If you just search Google Search Console in Google, you'll find the address and the details for the sign up. But once you're logged into the console, I'm just using the same site again. If you go down to the left, Core Web Vitals, so you'll see that ongoing performance here for the last 3 months. I think this one might be 4 months even. You can see here desktop and mobile, and you can see URLs need improvement. So if I click in here, it'll give you a bit more detail. So we have an LCP issue. So as we talked about before, these URLs are actually slow, definitely a problem. So this site definitely needs some work and needs some love, but this is a good way to see what's going on. Some of the limitations here, again, 28 days for things to update, and it also doesn't give very precise information. You'll see here it gives groups of pages, and it just kind of gives a vague idea of what's going on here. So you'll see URL groups. It'll give you the score for the group of pages. So the LCP average here is 3.7 seconds. Remember, we need to be under 2.5. So we're way over here, and it's giving us a group of pages. That's broadly useful. It's not super useful in terms of figuring out what's happening on each individual page there, but still useful data to see what's going on, and it's kind of an overall view of what's happening with the site. Once you've kind of fixed your speed, you come in here and click validate fix, and Google will come back to you in some period of time, 2 to 4 weeks, and tell you whether you're passing or failing again. We looked at before the Pagespeed Insights tests. So you have mobile and desktop again, and then you have the data at the top. Again, it's kind of broad data. It's not super specific. It's it's overall for the site. And here we don't have enough traffic for the homepage, so it's giving us the site-wide data. So remember, keep that in mind. You have site-wide data, the origin data, and then you have specific URL data, and they can be very different. As we talked about, the homepage here is scoring 96 on Pagespeed Insights, but we're still failing, so it's not ideal. And then we have CRUX dashboard report. So if you go to our website, go to here under more free stuff, free Core Web Vitals report. You can generate a report here. It takes 60 to 90 seconds to run, and it will give you that site speed data. And there is an example report there. I won't go into it too much, but you kind of get the same high level stuff when you get the historical data. If you click the menus on the left, there's a video here that talks about it in more detail. So I won't talk about it here. So those are the 3 free ways, I guess, to look at Core Web Vitals data. We have this issue, like I talked about, we have groups of pages here and not very specific information. So this is a problem for us for speed optimization. So we built this tool that pulls the same data Google does and allows us to see what's going on. I'll just change this so it's desktop versus mobile visitors. And I'll rerun the report. So I'll give you an example here of this site has some issues with paid traffic. We talked about earlier in the video how different traffic sources can have different speeds. And if you're interested in learning more about this tool, there is a demo video on our website. If you go to under services, and you'll see Vital Signs Tracker, that's what it's called. We had It's taken 2 or 3 years to develop this in-house, and we're now making it available publicly as well. So there's a video here that walks through how it works in more detail, but I'll give you an overview here. So this is the last 28 days of data. So one thing this tool solves for us, we can make a change today and run a report in 3 days' time and see what's happening with the site. It also allows us to see, we're also tracking the indexability of pages, so we can run this report with indexed pages or non-indexed pages. Typically, pages that are not indexed by Google are not included in Core Web Vitals, so by default, we don't include it here. But we get the same kind of high-level overview of the data here. It's much more granular because we're counting every single session, and we can slice and dice it more. But you can see here, this site is broadly passing very good LCP. This is in milliseconds, so 2,500 milliseconds is what we need to be under. So we're well in the, the site is fast here. We scroll down, these metrics are all green. And then you'll see here we have country by country metrics. And you'll see this site is only dealing with Australian customers, so that's all we care about. But you can see here international traffic is not super fast in some cases. Singapore traffic is slow. South Africa traffic is slow. Now, I know this site, that's like 0.5% of traffic, so it's not a big deal. But, some sites where Indian traffic, for example, might be 30% of the traffic, that can really drag down the numbers. So you can see here, particularly Singapore is not doing so well in terms of speed. So you need to keep that in mind, particularly if you have a site serving a global audience. With this tool, you can slice and dice, segment the data in lots of different ways. So I've just segmented it here. You can see desktop versus mobile. Another way we do it is logged in versus logged out WordPress users. That can be useful for membership sites and for WooCommerce sites. But let me just scroll down here. So we're just talking about country stuff. Now let's talk about traffic sources. So you can see here anything with GAD source attached to the end of it, and I'll just filter here. So overall we're passing, but you can see here anything that's coming to the site with paid traffic is super slow. We're pretty much red across the board in our important metrics here. So time to first byte is poor because these custom query strings are bypassing all of the speed optimizations. So you'll see here, time to first byte on the homepage is 3 seconds. That's huge. So LCP time's obviously blowing out there to 4 seconds for 75% of those users. So this is what I mean before. You've got to keep in mind the traffic sources are going to be different. So different countries are going to look different. Different traffic sources are going to be different. So typically we will see this issue with Google ad traffic or any paid traffic that's using any type of click fraud. Typically, speed optimization plugins and tools will recognize common query strings like UTM tracking strings from Google and Facebook tracking strings, but they won't recognize custom tracking strings from click fraud tools or anything that you've built that is a custom string. And a lot of email traffic has the same issue as well. So you need to keep that in mind. And also, because this traffic is bypassing caching and speed optimization, if you're sending emails, 10,000 emails, 100,000 emails with query strings on them, and that's bypassing caching, it's going to knock your hosting over very, very quickly. So something to keep in mind. But with Vital Signs Tracker, you can really get into the kind of granular specifics of what's going on, and that's why we built the tool. We also, for troubleshooting, the INP and CLS is good on this site, but for some sites it's bad, and we actually tag the data as well for these 3 metrics, so you can actually troubleshoot what the element is on the page that's causing the INP or CLS or LCP. So there's a lot you can do with the tool, and that's why we built it for our own in-house use, and a lot of customers use it on an ongoing basis. So that's tracking Core Web Vitals. Screaming Frog SEO Spider. We also use this. This is a SEO tool. This tool here, it's a weird name, but it's a great tool. It can also do site-wide speed tests. So we use this tool to see page sizes or page weights across the site. So as part of our consulting work, we do site-wide crawl, and we use this tool to do it. So that is another useful tool to digging into the data. It's a bit more advanced there. So what else do we have to talk about? I think that's pretty much it for kind of the high-level overview of Core Web Vitals. So all pages matter. We talked about this. So that's pretty much it for part 1 of this video. So broadly, just to recap, Core Web Vitals is the real data users getting on the site. So this data is pulled from anyone with a Chrome-based browser that's accessing your site, and probably 70 or 80% of the browsers on the web are Chrome-based now. Doesn't mean they are Google Chrome. I'm using Brave browser right now that is Chrome-based, so that still pulls the data. It's another important one just to keep in mind as well. If you have a lot of staff on the website editing things, logged in all the time using Google Chrome, they may blow out the metrics as well. So just keep that in mind. So Core Web Vitals, 28-day average. It's the real data real speed data, or the real speed people are getting on the website. Keep in mind that speed test tools are lab data or synthetic testing, and they can be faked. Someone promising you 100 score in Pagespeed Insights doesn't necessarily mean you're going to pass Core Web Vitals. And Core Web Vitals data is what actually matters in the real world. Page speed score is not used in Google's algorithm anywhere at all. Core Web Vitals data is, and the real speed of the site affects SEO, and also has downstream impact on conversion and everything else as well. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to talk about the practical steps you can take to improve those metrics. So we just talked about what the metrics are, what Core Web Vitals is, and we get into kind of the tactics and the nitty-gritty action steps in the next video. If you have any questions, post in the comments below. If you need help with your website, Core Web Vitals, head to our website, wpspeedfix.com. On the homepage, you can request a free audit, and we'll have a look at your site and see how we can help. We also have this WordPress speed test tool here. So if you want to get in and see what's wrong with your website and DIY, run your site through that test. It takes about 90 seconds, no opt-in required, and it will give you detailed information on how you can improve your site speed and things that are wrong with the page. And again, it's Core Web Vitals focused, not focused on giving you a particular score. It's focused on speeding up the site in the real world. But hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. Cheers.